Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Getting my machine set up for my binding today. I'm going to do some binding. I have 2 quilts to put binding on today. We'll get started here in just about a minute. I'm getting my machine all threaded up and all that fun stuff. And let's see here. What I'm doing, I am changing my thread color from last night. And I'm using this color right here. It's an orchid color. And the quilt that I will be using, let's see, first of all, hello Eugenia, hi Carol, hi Nancy, hi Marcia. So the quilt, you see my mess, y'all, I have not been up long. I'm on my second cup of coffee, so bear with me. This is my quilt that I'm going to be binding first. This is a Tula Pink quilt called Big Charmer. And as you can see here, I finally got my quilting done on it. And all I have left to do is the binding. Here is going to be my binding fabric for it. And as you can see, I don't have Tula Pink backing on this one, but there's a beautiful lavender orchid color, and that will go just fine with it and all that fun stuff. Let me think here. Is that what I want to do? I remember now, I did not use this color on here, but this will blend in on my backing of the stitch. Yeah, I'm going to use the orchid because I'll be using orchid on both quilts. So, yeah, me rattling a little bit, yeehaw. Me pulling this camera up. Ooh-wee. So, the other quilt I'm going to bind today is one of my Hoffman Dream panels that I finally finished quilting and all that fun stuff. I'm going to swap to my other camera, everybody. And wonderful, good audio, perfect, wonderful, wonderful. I'd love to see that. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to swap to my other camera, and I'm going to wind. I have some partial bobbins in that color, but you know what? I'm just going to wind. I think I have 2 empty bobbins. Yes, I do. Woohoo! I'm going to wind 2 more bobbins, and then we're going to get started sewing. So I'm going to swap my camera. There we go. You can see my coffee right there. Woohoo. So, what I have on my machine is my digital dual feed foot, and I have the 1/4 inch plate on it. Okay, so which means this is a 1/4 inch piecing foot that I was using last night. Oh my goodness. But this is what I am going to attach I'm going to use this to attach the binding to the quilt. But first we are going to wind 2 bobbins. Get on there, you. There we go. Okay. So, and I'm using this thread right here. I'm going to back this out a bit so you can see. You'll see a little bit of my mess, but you know what? It is what it is. It's better than it normally is, so that's a good thing. Oops. And yes, I normally rarely do I put a small spool of thread on my machine. I use cones. This is Madeira Aero Quilt 40 weight quilting thread. It's a polyester thread, which is a good thing because that means less lint build up in my bobbin case, and that's always a good thing. So just flip that over. I'm going to press the start button, and now that bobbin is winding. I'm going to do one more. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you. Hi, Diane. Good morning. We're getting ready to have the second heat bubble hit us from out west, and we've had the AC cranked up all night to get the house super cooled before the heat gets here. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. This old house has 11-foot ceilings throughout, and you just got to kind of keep up on things so that you don't have. Anyway, so it just helps if you know a heat wave is coming in this house to pre-cool it down as low as you can get it, and then the central air can keep up with it. I'm going to do one more, and that should be enough, I think, at least for this quilt anyway. I'm going to wrap it around there 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then it's got a little ring right here with slots in it that you can tuck that thread down into, so you don't actually have to thread the bobbin to wind it. Most baby lock machines have that. Oh my goodness, 99. Oh, well, Nancy, you can certainly. Oh wow, you have 3 feet taller than mine. My goodness. Hi, Sue. And listen, everybody, one reason I've decided to start doing this is I have a lot of projects I need to work on. And if I know I'm going to film it live on YouTube, if I'm going to do it live, I know it'll get done then because I'm going to keep on going to get it done and all that fun stuff. So I'm kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Hopefully I'm making some good creative content for you, and I'm also getting some of my work done that I need to get done. God, I hope that just made sense. Okay, my bobbins are wound. Now I'm going to thread my needle. We're about to get started. Okay. Alrighty, I'm going to lose this camera. I'm going to move it out of my way for right now. I'll just set it over here. Okay. And now we'll just get a closer view of it. We're done with the mess. What the stitch that I'm going to use right now, sewing, is the Q-01, the piecing stitch in the middle. But when I'm piecing, I have my stitch length set to 1.8 millimeters. To attach my binding onto the quilt, I'm actually going to turn that up to 2.5 millimeters. And that's a good length, in my opinion. Now then, attaching binding on a machine. I do have 3 videos on this also, but what I'm going to do, and I always have to think of this when I do it, because if you're going to attach binding and then hand stitch it down, you want to attach your binding to the front and then flip it to the back to hand stitch down, right? So it's just the reverse if you're going to machine stitch it down, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to attach my binding to the back of the quilt, and then on the next step I will flip it to the front. Now I can't tell you how many times I have forgotten to stitch it to the back and maybe stitch down a couple feet of it and realize, oh gosh, I've got to rip it out and flip it, and that way it'll be on the right process. I've already made all of my binding. And let's see here. How can I get I'm going to zoom in. There we go. So what I want to show you here is how I get my binding. This is 2.5 inch binding, and I've joined the strips. I've mitered all the strips together, pressed the seams open, fold it in half, wrong sides together, and press it. And I use steam when I pressed for this. But when I get up here at my starting point, notice this is the back facing me. I have a 45-degree angle cutting that binding. I'm going to fold this over about 1/4 inch and press it like so, right there. And then it will get folded over like this, the entire bit of the binding and pressed like so. And my starting point is going to be this funky little piece up here at the top. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to place this on the edge of my quilt like so. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to stitch down 6 or 7 inches, and then I'm going to cut my thread, and then I'll fold it back over and start right above where I cut the thread, and then sew all 2 layers down all the way around my quilt. The reason I do that, when I come back, when I get all the way around and I come back to here, I'll have a little sleeve to tuck the end of that other end of binding down into, fold it over and stitch it down, and you'll see this today. And then when it's done, I have a beautiful finished fold, and I don't have to stop, and I don't stitch the 2 ends together is what I'm saying. I'll stitch it down into this sleeve, I'll insert the other end into the sleeve, stitch it down, and then when I flip it over and I stitch it down again, it's all stitched down without ever having to try to miter the 2 ends together. Okay, I hope that made sense. You'll see it here while I'm doing it. So, let's see here. I'm going to get as close as I can with this camera. Let's see here. Let me try this other camera here for a moment. We're going to swap them. And my zoom button is right here. Oops, other way. Oh, much better. There we go. There we go. Okay. So as you can see, I have this binding laid open here, right? So I'm going to make sure that part that I pressed down, I'm just going to move this a little bit just to get a little better angle for you. Hold on. There we go. There we go. Back it out just a bit. There we go. Okay. Now, as I was saying, I'm going to do about 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches down. I'm going to line it up along my edge. I have it opened up. Let me look over here. Hold on. Hey, Katie Bug, I do not have, I've only got one ceiling fans in the bedroom. I do not have that in the studio. Where do you choose to make your binding join? So Nancy, when I cut my bias strips, and I'll do another video on that to show you that process, but I do have a video on that, and I'll have to find that and put a link so it can be. Anyway, I have a video on that, how to cut bias binding strips, and the way I cut it, in the cutting process, it will automatically cut these 45-degree angles, and you just join your strips together. There'll be varying lengths and all that, but that's another video. I will do a separate live on that to show you that process. So I'm going to get started here. Okay, there we go. Now then, I'm just going to line up a single layer of my raw edge right here, and I've got the 1/4 inch piecing foot with the metal edge guide. I'm just going to butt these edges right up against it. I am going to turn on my laser light. My seam allowance. You can see that green. See how that green light is? That should be right at the edge. I'm just going to start stitching. Okay. Now, I'm just going to come down here about this far, where this finger's at, right here. And I'm going to just let it come up and touch that presser foot. So it's about 8 to 9 inches or so. There we go. Now I'm going to cut my thread. Okay. and then I'm going to fold it over. And I've sewn up to right here. I just want to start about an inch above that and go through all the layers. And I'm going to go down to my first corner before I stop again. Okay, back it up a little bit. I'll tie that off. There we go. Okay, so I'm really close to a corner, so you'll get to see that. So I am going to swap over to the other camera because I think you'll be able to see it from this other angle as I'm going here, and this will be beneficial. It's super beneficial for doing the corners. So have everything lined up here, and I'm just going to stitch it down. Using a 1/4 inch seam. And what I want to do when I get up here closer to the end of this line, this corner, I want to stop my stitching a 1/4 inch away from the edge of my quilt sandwich. A 1/4 inch away from the edge of my quilt sandwich. There are markings on this foot, red marks, and that will tell me where my 1/4 inch, where the 1/4 inch is to stop at. Go slow so I don't overshoot it. Okay, then I'll just back it up. And then I'm going to cut. Okay, now each time we get to a corner like that, we have to cut it, and then we're going to fold the binding. Okay, let me get this over here so it's on the camera better. There we go. So here's where we've sewn down to, right here, and we're going to turn the corner and come down this way. So I want to take my binding and I'm going to line up the raw edges here so they line up with this edge right here, okay? And then I'm going to finger press that 45-degree angle where I have folded this. See how that is folded right there? See there? You're going to fold it, finger press, and then you're going to fold it, the whole binding down, matching the fold line to this edge right here, and your raw edges with the new direction you're going to go. Okay? If you want to, you can pin it to hold it in place until you get it up underneath the presser foot, or you can just put your fingers on it and rotate it. But there we go. Now we're ready to come down, and we're going to start here at the folded edge and do another 1/4 inch seam all the way to the other corner. And that pin, we're not going to sew over it this time because it's at an angle. You could also use a wonder clip. This will just help you get it in place so you can get it to underneath the foot where you want to lower that foot at. I'm going to lower it, and then I'm going to pull the pin out because now I'm all set. Everything's right where it needs to be. And I'm just going to start stitching. I'll take a couple forward and a couple back, and then I'm just going to stitch down all the way to the next corner. Let me see any questions here. Well, Nancy, yes, I start it somewhere in the middle of a side of the quilt. Doesn't matter whether it's the top or the bottom or the side. Just in the middle. This time I actually was closer, a little more like 2/3 of the way down a side. That really doesn't matter. You just don't want to start at a corner. You want to start in between the two corners, anywhere that's comfortable for you to start at. Now, what will happen, the way I make my binding, as I come down, where is it? There it is. I have a couple little dog ears sticking out from here, from where I piece my binding. See if I can get that on camera. But what I'm going to do is I come to those, I'm just going to trim off those little dog ears. There's one. Just trim it even with this edge, and When you do this, you'll see it. Sometimes they're more pronounced. Let's go to the next one. This one can be seen much easier. Here's what I'm talking about, the dog ears. See how those are sticking out? That's just from where I mitered two pieces together. That's all it is. But now we're going to go ahead and stitch this all the way to the next corner. And everybody, there are a ton of different ways to do binding, different binding techniques. For today, I'm just doing what I call a basic bias binding, and I will use nothing but straight stitches to stitch it down once I flip it over to the front. All I'm doing is lining it up as I go. Easy peasy. Getting close to my next two dog ears to trim. Okay. And as you can see, it's not difficult to do this. It just takes a little time. On a large quilt, like right here, I have a lot of bulk right here to deal with. And I do have it all up on a table. If you have your quilt hanging over the edge of the table and you're trying to manipulate all of these layers through, it can be a little bit of a challenge, so it's much better if you have the weight of the quilt supported on top of the table that your machine is on. Even if you have to put a folding table over here on your left side to help support the weight, that's a good thing. I'm going to trim the two dog ears. Here we go. And this is something, you know, if I wasn't live streaming this, I'd be listening to some nice soft music. It's very relaxing to do this. Now I'm getting to my second corner already. Yeehaw. I'm going to go ahead and trim these two dog ears before I go any further, since they're here in my view. And I just trim them as I go. No biggie. I'm going to slow up and stop a 1/4 inch away from this edge right here, or as close to a 1/4 inch as I can get it. And that's it right there. Back it up 2 or 3 stitches and then cut it. Now we can turn that corner. See, it does go fairly fast, and once again, once you get to that corner, you're going to lay this out so your raw edge is going to line up with the raw edge on the corner that we're about to turn. Just finger press that 45-degree angle down, like that. Fold it over. Finger press that fold line down. That's even. That fold line is even with this edge that we just stitched down. Then we're going to go back and I'm not going to pin it this time, because normally this is what I do. I'll put my fingers right here where they're at, and I'll just rotate it with my hand down on my table and position it underneath that presser foot and lower the presser foot and take a couple of stitches, and then I'll reposition my sandwich. With the needle stopping in the down position, everything will stay in place. Just bring that other edge of the quilt on around. Get everything nice and lined up. And there we go. As you can see, it's totally, this is all there is to this step until we get to where we're going to join the two pieces together. Gia, how do you square up the quilt before attaching binding? That's a wonderful question. I will have to do a video on that. Now, I have a very large cutting table. It is 4 feet by 8 feet. Mike built that for me this year. And I use a 15-inch square omni-grid ruler, and I trim the corners of a quilt first and then use rulers to line it up from the corner to the next. I will have to do a video on that because even describing it, you'll just have to see how I do that, and that will be in a future live video. But long story short, when you're going to square up your quilt, when this was quilted, it had extra batting and backing fabric. What I do, I trim my corners first. A large square quilting ruler, I have a 15-inch one, is what I use, and I will cut my corners first. And then, after I do that, I will line up my 24-inch rulers or a yardstick along with the edges of the quilt in between the corners to get that straight cut lined up. Once your corners are square, everything else will square up fairly easily. I hope that makes sense. We are still running networking cable to be able to film so I can do a live in the other room where my long arm and cutting tables are. And that will be coming shortly. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Gia. And what I do, you saw how close my hand got to that needle. So I let when the end of my finger touches this metal, the front edge of this metal foot, I don't have to really be watching it. I know then just to take my foot off of the foot control to stop it. You just don't want to let your finger go on top of a presser foot. That's how you get a needle through your finger. Been there, done that one too. And you just want to be careful and you'll be fine. You'll only do that once, trust me. If you ever do it, you'll only do it once. Because you never forget after that to watch where your finger is in relationship to where the needle of the sewing machine is. Now I'm going to slow up and I'm going to stop a quarter. See, here's my third corner. I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch away from where I've trimmed this quilt, from the edge of the quilt sandwich. And back it up. Okay, and cut. Then we'll be ready to turn that corner again. Let's see here. Nancy, I've only had it happen once. It'll still turn with my method. But I've only actually had that happen once, believe it or not. I don't know why it hasn't happened more often than that. Now that we just talked about it, I'm sure now it's going to happen today. But what you could do, if that bothers you, what you could do if, and what she's talking about, let's say that's a seam where I've joined binding, presents itself right at the corner, all you'd have to do is rip this out a little ways up this way and join it, rejoin it so this trim it and join it so your seam lands up here and not right here. That's an easy fix. No big woo. And that would be what I would recommend to do. Because, yeah, really, you don't want all the... I've never had the bulk land exactly at the corner. I've had it land like an inch away from the corner, and it worked out fine. But if it was going to land right on that corner, I would rip this out about 6 or 7 inches up from the corner up this way, and then cut it and re-splice it so it's spliced up here and not exactly on the corner. God, I hope that made sense. Okay. Now we're going to flip it over and get the other, come and stitch down this other side. Excuse me. Okay. There we go. Everybody, I don't worry about where my bulk is over here. Let me back this lens up a little bit. You can see I have a big pot. My pile of my quilt is right here beside it. I just want to make sure as it's feeding through the machine here that this area is laying nice and flat as it goes through. And that just makes for a much better result. Okay. Okay, here we go. And we're just keeping on, keeping on. Only got one more corner to turn, regardless the size of your quilt. As long as it's, you know, a square or a rectangle quilt, yeah, you're only going to have 4 corners to turn. Hopefully, anyway. If you have more than 4 corners on a square or a rectangle, there's something wrong somewhere. Okay. You know, and if you don't have a walking foot or a digital walking foot, you can do this with a regular 1/4 inch piecing foot, the step I'm doing right now. The second quilt, I'm going to take this off and just use a regular foot to do the binding with. I prefer to use this attachment when I am doing my binding. But you don't have to do that. Some walking feet, there are walking feet today that have 1/4 inch plates, and I don't mean this one, but like the dynamic walking foot, which is an all metal foot. It's an awesome foot. Yeah, and one of the other feet, they actually have interchangeable plates, not as many as the digital dual feed, but they do have like an open toed and a 1/4 inch and a stitch in the ditch plate. Because a lot of people actually quilt using a walking foot or a digital dual feed foot. If you have the availability to use a walking foot or a digital dual feed foot to do any you're binding with, I highly recommend it, because those feet are designed to handle multiple layers of fabric. Okay. once again, I'm coming to this corner, and there's a seam right there, and here's the next one right here. So I have yet to have a seam even get close to one of my corners. It just rarely happens. For some reason, I don't know why. Okay. I'm going to slow up when I get to this corner and stop a 1/4 inch away from the side of the quilt. Right here. 1/4 inch away from this edge. And like I said earlier, on top of this foot plate, there are red marks. There's a red mark that shows me where that 1/4 inch would be away from the needle. Okay, I'm not just guessing at it. I actually have a visual cue so that I know where to stop at. Let's see, is that a different extension table for Gia? This is the extension table that fits the Solaris. All machines have extension tables that are made that will specifically fit perfectly on that machine. This one actually is, I think, 20, well, where's my ruler? Yeah, so this one is actually 26 inches by, I think, about 18 or 20 this way. Makes for a nice big flat surface. If you don't have a cabinet that your machine fits into, I highly, highly recommend you have an extension table for your machine. And I personally, So Steady makes a clear one, and I have one of those for my Altair. But for the Solaris, and I prefer the baby lock one simply because it kind of throws my eyes off a little bit if I can see through an extension this extension table where you see everything underneath it. I like it to be the same color. To me, it just helps me visualize everything. So we're going to do another corner. I'm going to give me a sip of my coffee here. I think, look, yes, this is the last corner to turn. Yeehaw. Okay. And all I did, I took my binding, and fold it, make sure the raw edges of the binding is lined up with the raw edges to where I'm going to start stitching next. Fold it back, just line it all up, finger press those fold lines down. Then I'm just going to hold my fingers right there on this corner as I turn it to fit back under the foot. You can pin it or wonder clip that corner down if you want to. I just find it easier to either pin it or do this. It's a little more difficult to wonder clip. Good morning, Puffin. My little dog just woke up. Oh my goodness, aren't you happy? Are you happy this morning, Puffy? Yes, you are. You're a good boy. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and just stitch it on down here. Now you will get to see how I'd actually join the two ends. Okay, so here we go. Let me get my binding up and over my quilt. And I always make a little extra binding for some reason, just how it turns out, and that's okay. I have a bag of scrap pieces where I've had leftover binding, and eventually I'll just make one big colorful binding out of all of those short pieces to go around one of my quilts. Okay. Last set of dog ears. So see, there's a seam right here, a seam right there. Let me back this up just a hair. There we go. Just going to give that a trim. Give that one a trim. Okay. Now then. This quilt top only took 1 layer cake and 3 yards of backing fabric. super fun to make. There was a lot of cutting. The cutting was I would say the cutting out of all the pieces was the hardest part to make this quilt. Maybe not the hardest. Hardest is the wrong word to use. The most challenging part was actually cutting out all the pieces for it. But I have found with making quilts, if you have to cut pieces, cut all of your pieces before you ever start sewing. That way the hard part is over with. Okay, so now we're getting close to where we started. Excuse me. And now you can see this. So let me get this up here where we can get a good camera view of it. Okay, put this aside. Here's where we started. And let's get closer. I'm going to move the camera closer. Might be a little shaky. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so here's where we started. See how I have this opening right here? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open this up. Here's my binding. I'm sewing down, everybody. Okay, so check this out. This is open to right here. Okay, so I'm going to let this come down on top of it. Back this out some. There we go. So I'm just going to say that again. There's the opening. It's sewn to right there where my finger's at, right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay this on top of it, and I'm going to cut it at a 45-degree angle, approximately, about 2 inches down from the opening, right there like that. Okay, now I have my excess. Well, I have a lot of. Why did I have? Oh, I have a lot of binding left over. That was unusual. Usually don't make that much extra binding. Oh well, it's okay. Throw that to the side. And now that I have that there, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to lay this right on the inside of it. Check it out. And fold that back over. And now, all I'm going to do is sew it all the way down and go over where I started at, and that part will be done. Check it out. Did that make sense to everybody? So once again, check this out. Now that we're getting closer, I'm going to readjust it and come in a little closer on the camera. There we go. You see it's open right here. There's my cut where I trimmed it. I'm just going to lay that on the inside of this sleeve. Fold that back over. Make sure the raw edges all line up right there. And then I'm going to stitch it down. And my binding is now completely attached to the back of my quilt. I'm going to trim off that dog ear. And now when I pull it up, check this out right here. I'll show you. You can see right there is my little sleeve opening. When I flip it over to the front and actually stitch it down, that will all be secured together to the front of my quilt. Unless you really look hard for it, right there is where it was where I did my little faux splice, right there where I'm rubbing my finger. That's how easy that is to do. Okay, so next, let me see. I will have to change my foot. Do I want to go ahead and stitch? I'm going to go ahead and stitch the other one down so they're both at the same stage, and then I can change the foot. Well, now wait a minute. Now we're going to do the other one a different way. Okay, never mind. So Now when I start stitching, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a pin where that splice is because there's a little bit of extra bulk there, and I will know to go slow over that once I get to it. So right there's where my splice will be, right where I put that pin. But this, I'm going to start on this side where the splice is. Now doing this part, I do like to start at the corner. Okay? And what we're going to do on these corners, I'm going to trim those threads for one thing. I am going to trim a little bit off of that sharp corner right here. Okay? So I'm just going to clip the corner without going into my seam, my stitching that I just did here. So I'm just going to stitch it clip it like that. See how I did that? You can see that dark thread. That is where I just stitched it down to the back, and I clip through all layers like that. Now, when I turn this to the front, I'm going to lay it down on my table. I'm going to trim these threads even with the front of the quilt. When I trim it, it will fold right over like this. Okay? And that will fold over right there, giving me a perfect mitered corner. Look at that. Look how nice and square that corner is. Now I need I know what I did not grab now. I have to get my clips and my glue. I'll be right back. I'm going to turn on the intermission screen. Everybody will take a 5-minute intermission, and I can deal with Puffin because he's begging to go outside. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, everybody, I'm back. Thank you for hanging in there. So what I did, I took Puffin outside out back so he could go potty. He was ready to go. And what I also picked up, I picked up my little tub of Wonder Clips. Back this up a bit. There we go. Have my Wonder Clips, and I have my basting glue. This is Roxanne Glue Basted. Right there. Oops. And what I do is now, if you recall, I trim my corner on my binding. Now I'm going to put it down. I'm going to put my finger right there where I trimmed it. Just a minute. There we go. I got my finger right where I trimmed it, and I'm going to gently pull up the edges of the binding, and I'm going to put a drop of glue right where I clipped that corner. Okay? Put a little glue right where I trimmed that corner. And then I'm going to fold it over. And what I'm doing, I'm temporarily glue basting my mitered corners for this binding. Do I have to do that? No, I don't. I do it because I have found I get really super beautiful mitered corners on my binding if I just take the time and glue down the corners ahead of the stitching. Okay? I'm going to bring this closer to the camera once I get it all clipped, and you'll see what I've done, how I've clipped this. Okay. Now I'm going to do this to all four corners, but see how I did that? Right there's my mitered corner, and those are just to hold it in place. The only place I put glue was underneath this clip right here. But if I just take that off temporarily, you can see that beautiful mitered corner, and it gives it a nice square finish on the quilt top itself right there. So I'm just going to take 3 clips and glue and clip each corner is what I'm going to do next. Okay, there's my next corner, and I'm going to trim it. Just to take that sharp point off, it just makes the binding easier to turn the corner if you clip it. I'm going to put my finger on it. Make sure the binding's going to come all the way up around. Okay, then I'm going to glue, put a bead of glue at that corner. This glue is made for quilters. It will not stain your fabric. It will completely launder out when you launder it without making a mess or anything like that. Okay. I'm just going to clip the corner itself and just pass the corner. That keeps it all nice and in place and gives it time for that glue to set. Okay. So there's the next one. There's the back of it. Okay. And I used to clip everything down all the way around the edge, but I've discovered, yeah, that was overkill. I don't really need to do that. By all means, if you're more comfortable with it, you can do it. That's a good thing to do while you're sitting in front of the TV watching a little television, is to actually put the Wonder Clips all the way around the binding. Here we go, and we're going to get that corner fully nested in there. We're going to add our glue. Fold that edge down. This one up and over. Right there. And then clip it. Just remember, all you need are 3 clips for each corner, unless you're going to go around and clip the entire thing. If you have unruly binding for some reason, if you were having like let's say you had a scalloped edge around your quilt and this was going to be all curves, I would probably clip the entire thing at that point. Gia, the name of the quilt glue is Roxanne Glue Basted. And I don't have this listed in the description. I will add that after the fact. Let's see here, where's my keyboard? I'm going to type it in. Oops, hold on. Let me get my keyboard. Just type that into the field right now so I don't forget it. Roxanne Glue Based It. There we go. That's it. It is good stuff. It goes a long way. I've had this bottle for at least 2 years. It's 2 ounces. It's not expensive. It does come with a metal tip because you can use this in applique also. But I have got mine so gunked up with glue, I just haven't taken the time to clean it. So anyway, yeah, wonderful good stuff here. Recommended highly. Okay, so let's see, that one's all clipped. Let's go to the next one. And we'll trim that corner tip. You see right there, I did not trim much. Just a little bit to take that sharp point off. I'm going to add some glue to that corner. Here we go. There we go. Okay. Get my little clips on there. And I think I have one more corner to go. There it is. Let's see how I did that. There's the front. There's the back. The clips have a flat side and a curved side. I personally like to put the flat side of the clip against where I'm gluing at. It just gets a better bite that way, so to speak. Okay, let's get to our other corner. Oh, nope, that was it. That's all 4 corners. Yay, good. Goody goody. So, now we're back to where we started. I'm going to set up my machine. Guess what? I am going to take off the 1/4 inch piecing foot and I'm going to attach, oops, do I have it out? I need my open-toed plate, foot plate, just a moment. And where are you? Oh, I know where it's at. Well, I thought I had everything out, but obviously I didn't. What I'm at, I'm over here to my stand where I keep my supplies. Getting my case out. There we go. Okay. And what I'm going to use to top stitch it down with is this plate right here for the digital dual feed foot. This is called the open-toed plate for the digital dual feed. And what I'll do when I fold it over, I'm going to run the edge right along the inside of this metal flange right here, and I'll use that as a guide to top stitch it down in a straight line. I will start in the corner and move from corner to corner. I will not break my thread at each corner. It'll be a continuous stitch all the way around. I hope that made sense. So let's see if that glue is done. Yes. So I'll take those two off, and now you can see with that off, that corner is staying glued down. So it makes it super easy to line everything up to start stitching. And once I get this down, I'm going to try to get the camera closer. Okay. Let's see here. I know how I can do this. Maybe. What I'm going to do, I'm going to swap over to what I used for my face cam earlier. Here we go. Just so you can see how I've got that lined up right there. There we go. What I'm doing, I'm going to put this, see how I've got this folded edge, folded it over here, and this edge of the fold of the binding is going to go right to the inside of that digital dual feed foot. See how I've got that lined up? Right there. I'm going to lower it. Oops. Okay. And we'll go back to our other camera. So now all I'm going to do, I have not changed my machine settings or anything, but I'm going to start that needle so it drops at that miter. And I'm going to do a straight stitch. Start with a straight stitch just inside the edge of that folded binding seam, about a 1/16 of an inch away from it. And as I go, I will just fold my binding over like so. You get it closer. I'm just going to fold it over as I go. See there? Just fold that over. Put a finger there. And what I'm doing, this folded edge is just touching and button it up against the inside edge of that open-toed foot. And by stopping with it in the needle down, especially when doing binding, that keeps that line of stitching nice and straight. Hold on here. I'm going to move a cord so that I can get you a better look at this here in just a moment. There we go. Just set this up right here in front of me, so I can swap it over occasionally so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. So you can see that red on this machine, the green light, this is a 1/4 inch, and I'm really not paying attention to the green. What I am paying attention to is that red. You want that red to line up basically right on top of your previous stitching. Fold it over and run this edge along the inside edge of that open-toed foot right here, and that will give you a perfect stitch down binding. See how I'm doing that? That's how I do that. I'll do a few more with this close-up camera, then I'm going to go back to a regular camera view. I just use that one finger just to smooth it down as I go. Now, if you had clipped it all the way around, you'd still have to stop and remove all those clips. So it doesn't really save you any time in this process by clipping it all over. It truly doesn't. I've tried it both ways. I thought, oh, I can save me a little time by doing it like that. But long story short, the answer is no to that. So now I'm going to go back over to this other view. Here we go. Okay, I'll move that out of the way now. And now we're just ready to go all the way around the edge and get this completely stitched down. Right here is my splice. So I'm going to take my time and make sure that's nice and smooth right here. Right in between my two fingers there is that splice, or our start and stop point from the last step. I'm just going to make sure I hold my fingers there and keep it nice and laid down, because there's a little bit of bulk here. And just keep it nice and smooth. And there we go. Just went right over that splice. Nothing else to worry about with that. That part's totally sewed down now. And I have used a decorative stitch on my binding. I like, if I'm going to do that, I really like the serpentine stitch. I'll have to do that in a different video. I've already started doing a straight stitch on this one, so I'm certainly not going to change it up. I want the same stitching all the way around. I have found by sewing for other people, most people just want their bindings sewed down with a straight stitch. I personally think a decorative stitch is prettier, but most people would just prefer a straight stitch. So that is why I am showing this with a straight stitch, because that seems to be the most popular stitch to sew binding down with. Getting close down to my next corner, that would be 1/4 of this completely. Listen everybody, once I finish this step, this quilt is 100% completely done. It's always a good feeling when you finish a quilt. Good morning, Tanya. Oh, you're welcome, Gia. Here we go. And now, as you can see, I'm coming up to my edge here. And where I'm going to stop my needle is right on the inside corner of this miter. So it's got a 45-degree miter from the outside corner to the inside corner. I'm going to stop my needle right at the miter before I pivot. Take these out. Notice with that out now, my binding stays all nice and folded over right there on that corner. There we go. Now I can pivot it and just come down the other side. That's all there is to it. That's how easy that is to do. Before, until about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I would only hand stitch my binding down, okay? That's how my Meemaw taught me, and I thought, well, you just have to do it that way, right? So it came to the point where I came from traveling in December, and I had 14 quilts of mine that I had quilted that needed the binding done. And I have to tell you, that's when I said, you know what? these quilts are not going to be a show quilt to go into a quilt show. So I'm going to stitch them all down by the machine. And you know what? I have never looked back since. In 2 weeks, I was able to put the binding on 14 quilts. And I had all my work caught up, and I was so happy. Let's see here. Hi, Vanessa. Oh, wonderful, Vanessa. And Vanessa, I haven't done it on this one, but the previous step where you're attaching the binding to the back of the quilt, you can do that on your serger. Yes, you certainly can, and I like doing it that way. But anyway, so, yes, look how pretty. See, this is still, the binding is Tula Pink fabric also, and the same pattern, and some of this fabric is inside of this, is actually in the quilt top itself as well. But I have to tell you, after I got over the thing of having to hand stitch binding down, and now that I do it by machine, I don't dread doing binding like I used to. And I will actually, the only time I hand stitch binding down now is if it's on one of my quilts that I'm going to enter into a quilt show. Other than that, it's all done on the machine. Even for customers, I do not hand stitch binding down. I just don't do that no more. Excuse me. As you can see, I'm just smoothing it out as I go. What I'm doing right now, you can do with any machine that takes a walking foot. Any machine, every machine will take a walking foot. Okay? A mechanical walking foot. So you can totally do this with any machine, this technique. I happen to be using the digital dual feed foot, which is a computerized walking foot that only fits some machines. Okay. Actually, all of my quilting is free motion quilting on this quilt. And I did 2 different patterns on it. Like the top half is one pattern, one of my free motion patterns. The bottom half is another one. And I use this quilt out in my long arm room to show customers some of the patterns that they can pick from for to do the quilting. Some of my free motion patterns. Right now I do not have a long arm with any type of robotics on it, and I just basically do custom free motion work is what I do. I charge 2.5 cents a square inch is what I charge the quilt. And I have a few quilts stacked up right now, and some in my frames. I have 2 long arms. I have a smaller long arm and then a larger one. I have a large quilt I'm going to load later this evening into my big long arm. Just got a cute baby quilt in yesterday to quilt for this lady. It's a super nice lady. It's going to be her grandson's first, it'll be her first great grandchild. So she's all excited. I found, quilting for other people, it's enjoyable. It's nice to see all the what other people like to piece and their fabric choices, and to hear the stories of them and everything. It's something I enjoy. I like to quilt. I also like to piece, so there you go. It's a good thing, right? I love to sew. I guess that's the long story short. Okay. Oh, thank you, Lynn. You're welcome. Hold on now. Oh, Linda, what I said was that. Oh, thank you, Gal. So, Linda, what I said was my first step where I attached the binding to the back of my quilt using a 1/4 inch seam. This step could totally be done with a serger, say a 4-thread overlock stitch or a chain stitch on a serger. You could 100% do that on a serger if you choose to. That's what I'd said about the serger. This step here cannot be done on a serger. Technically you could, it just, in my opinion, wouldn't look right. So I would never do this step I'm doing now, the top stitching, on the serger. What's really cool on a serger though, you could actually put fusible thread in a looper, and then when you turn it over, you could actually iron it and fuse it down without having to use glue. That's another video. Well, I'll do a live on that sometime. I'll put that on my list of live videos to do. And I'm going to take that corner, get all the clips off away from it. And we're going to just let my eyes wander off. Hold on, I think I'm going to have to do some ripping here. Yep, I let my binding slip out right here. Hold on. Let the binding get away from me. So I'm just going to have to rip it out a little bit and go over it. And that's okay. Let's see here. I need... Oh yeah, I see. I just got to rip out maybe 2 inches. I don't know where my seam ripper's at, so I'm just going to try to do it like this, the hard way. Here we go. Got a better bite. Stuff happens. I was jabber-jawing a lot with y'all. It wasn't paying attention. Here we go. And that'll be enough to get it back on track. There we go. Okay. Now then, we'll get back and get our binding down to this, stitch down to the corner here. There we go. Okay. I'm going to look at that and make sure it passes my quality assurance, and it does. It's looking fabulous. Look at that. Look at that binding. Woohoo. Okay. Get this edge lined up. Hey, this is our last side, everybody. This is our last side on this quilt. And this quilt will be 100% completed. So can anybody guess which quilt I'm going to sleep? I sleep under a quilt year round. Guess which one I'm going to be sleeping under tonight? I think y'all know the answer to that. Now I'll tell you, here's some quilting folklore for you. As some of you know, I am a 4th generation quilt maker. My Meemaw in Kentucky had 9 daughters on the farm, and they were all quilters, and that's what got me into quilting and sewing. I've been doing it my entire life. But I was told as a quilt maker that, yes, Linda, this is the one I'll be quilting on tonight. This one right sleeping under tonight. So what I was going to say is this. Because in our family, we always would sell quilts as a form just to supplement our income. Quilt tops and quilts both. But when you make a quilt, the quilt maker should always sleep under it for the first night. And what that does, that passes on creativity and prosperity to the next owner of the quilt. That's what I was taught many, many years ago, and I still do that even today. When I finish a quilt, I will sleep under it on my bed for the very first night of its existence. And then if I'm going to sell it, then I won't sleep under it anymore, of course. But the first night of the life of my quilt, I will, in essence, give it some of my soul and sleep underneath it. That's just how I was taught. I know it might sound weird to some people, but that's what I was taught as a little kid to make quilts. You sleep under it, and your karma or your soul or whatever will bestow protection and prosperity and good fortune to those who sleep under it after you do. Oh, wonderful, Linda. See everybody, it's a true thing. It's something quilt makers have done for centuries. And I will tell you, I truly believe that it's true. I really do. Because think of this, when you sleep under a quilt that you care about, that you love, doesn't it make you feel protected and safe at night when you snuggle under your quilt and go to bed? I know I do. It makes me feel that way. You know, that's kind of a metaphysical type of thing to say, but I don't know, I have found it to be the truth. Okay. Oh, we're getting so close to the end, everybody. Wow. Now, remember, I have another one. Quilt number 2, I'm going to be putting the binding on after this one. Once I finish this, I am going to take a short break. And then, because I'm going to reset the machine. I'll show you how I do that, though I won't do that all during the break. But I'm going to set up the machine for a different method, using different feet to attach binding. Okay, now we're getting down here to the very end. This corner that we started at. And I'll tell you the reason I like to go to start at a corner on these, because let's say if my bobbin is getting low for the quilting, and this one bobbin is going to be enough thread to do this entire process for the binding on this quilt. I can tell you, if I was using a serpentine stitch, I would have already run out of thread because it uses twice as much thread. is what a straight stitch does. And I'm just going to go slow and stop talking for just a moment so I can stop this and then back it up a few stitches and then cut it. And guess what, everybody? This quilt is complete. And it's so pretty. Oh my goodness. Hold on here. Get my threads cut. Back here. Now, remove this coffee. I sure don't want to get coffee on it now that I finished it. But check out, there's what it looks like on the back. Okay. And then there it is on the front. I'm going to set this camera so you can get a much better look at this quilt. Hold on. Let's see here. Oh, I know how to do this. I'm going to swap over to this other camcorder. Okay. I'm going to back out this zoom on it. Hold on. Right there. I'm just going to back out on the zoom and you can see, get a much better look at this quilt. It's just got, there's 42 different fabrics in this quilt because the pattern fabric was one layer cake of fabric that had 42 10-inch squares in it, and it took approximately 3 yards of this solid fabric, and all of this fabric, including the binding, is Tula pink fabric. This is not Tula pink fabric, okay? But there it is, all nice and finished and complete and ready for the bed. Or to hang on a wall. It really looks beautiful hanging up on a wall as well. Let me get a drink of my coffee. I'm going to spread this out a little bit. And then I'm going to give you a preview as to what I'm going to quilt on next when I get back from my break. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I have to tell you, when I used to hand stitch the binding down, I dreaded, literally dreaded putting the binding on a quilt. It was my least favorite thing to do. Using this type of a method, I love doing binding. So, let me grab the next quilt, and I'm going to show you. I trimmed the edges of it last night. Got it as square as I could get it. But it's one of those Hoffman flower panels that I've completely quilted on the embroidery machine. Let's get this out here. Right there it is. Isn't that beautiful? And you know what, everybody? The back. I think I like the back even better than the front. The back is just gorge. Look at that. Okay. But this is what we're going to be binding next. Spread this out. And my binding fabric is, the panel is made by the Hoffman Fabric Company. And this is the binding fabric that I have for it right here. It's got a little bit of a silver metallic in it. I don't know, that really probably won't show up on camera. It's beautiful fabric though. And check out, there's what the binding will look like against the edge of that. Perfect color binding for this one. And the thread that I just used, this is the same thread that I used for the quilting. And I'll be using that to attach my binding also. Okay, so thank you, Kimberly. I am going to take a good 5 to 10 minute break. What time is it? It's 11:28. Oh my gosh, you know what? I had planned on being here until 2 o'clock, but I've only got 2 quilts to bind, so we'll get out of this session a little bit early. But I'm going to go take about a 10-minute break, and I'll be back and we'll get started, and we're going to reset this machine up to use the quilt binding foot and a 1/4 inch piecing foot that's not a walking foot. So if you have a machine that you're just going to use regular feet on to do your binding, I'm going to show you how to do that next. Okay, I'll be back shortly. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started again. There we are. There's my hands. So, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to have to change some of the. I'm going to remove my digital dual feed foot. Just back this up some here. You can get a better look at everything. Oh my goodness. I'm very careful moving this because I have what you cannot see. Oh, Puffin, you found your little rat baby toy. Yes, you did. You found Rat Baby. Puffin has a toy he's had since he was a baby. He's 9 years old now. But when he was a baby, he loved, and he still loves it. He has the same one. It is called Rat Baby because it is a stuffed rat. And he loves that thing. It is his baby. He talks to it and cleans it and all that fun stuff. Come here, Bobo. Bring your baby. Let's let the people see your baby. Get your baby. Get your baby. Come here. So what I'm talking about, he's not happy. This is Puffin's Rat Baby right here. Okay? It has survived for almost 9 years now. And it's the only toy he has that he has not destroyed. But this is his baby. There's your baby. Okay, sorry. Don't bite me. So, hold on just a second here. Well, thank you, Linda. Oh, wonderful, Nancy. Thank you, Kimberly. Oh, hi, Linda. Oh, awesome, Linda. I have to go work on my long arm later today. I have another quilt to get loaded. I have one loaded in my Gallant long arm, and I have one to get loaded in my larger long arm as well. So, this is what we're going to put the binding on next, is this Hoffman Dream panel that I finished. It's 100% quilted in the hoop using IQ Designer. And what I'm going to do first, though, for this binding, I'm going to use a completely different method. And I'm going to remove my digital dual feed foot from the machine. Okay. And I'm going to unplug it from the back. There's that wire. And we're going to get this unscrewed over here. Once you get it unscrewed enough, you can just slide it right out and take it out from the back. There's that. Not going to use that on this one. But this is my go-to attachment for my quilt bindings. Is this little attachment right here. Okay. I'll just slide that underneath my extension table out of the way. Okay, so next, where is the ankle? I have to have my ankle. And that is in my box. Hold on. Hopefully it's in my box. Yes, there it is. There's my one. I just saw my seam ripper. I could have used that earlier. Right? Okay, so what I've referred to as ankle, that's what this is. This is where your snap-on presser feet attach to. And just go right back to where onto your shank of your machine where the dual feed, the walking foot was attached. Digital dual feed. Okay. There we go. That's all attached. So the first foot I'm going to use, I'm going to attach my binding to the back of this Hoffman quilt, Hoffman Dream Panel. I'm going to use the 1/4 inch piecing foot with the edge guide that came with the machine. Okay? Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. There we go. That's attached. Now then, I think I have enough thread wound. I know I have enough to attach the binding to the back, and then I'll change to another bobbin thread because I've decided during the break I'm actually going to use a serpentine stitch for the top stitching on this one. Oh, absolutely, Nancy. Everybody, I'm going to give you my email address. If you're interested in me quilting a quilt for you, you can email me and then we can start the discussion that way. Okay, hold on a second. My email is and I'm putting this in all caps simply because it's easier to see. But it doesn't have to be in caps when you actually type it in. I'm going to make sure that's spelled correctly. Yes, it is. Okay. That is my email address. If you'd like to drop me a line or inquire about me quilting a quilt for you, we can talk about it. Okay, so there's this. Isn't that pretty though? Gosh. And what I used for the background around all the petals was just your basic stippling. Let's see if that camera will pick it up. You can see it right there. All that is stippling. You can really see it from the back. There you go. And that was the default setting for the stippling in IQ Designer. I didn't alter it for this quilt or anything. Okay, so I have my straight stitch. I have my guide beams on. I'm going to leave those on. I just like to have those on. And I'm going to stitch. I'm going to attach my quilt, my binding to the back of my quilt. And then I will flip it on the front. There's that. Now let me get the end of my binding. There we go. And just like before, my binding was cut at a 45-degree angle, folded over 1/4 inch and pressed. And that's what I used to make my tube. Okay. So I'm just going to line this up. Oh, you're fine, Tanya. This table attachment does not come with the machine, does not come with the Solaris. One does not come with the Altair either. It's an optional accessory you can buy for your machine. I love these tables. They fit your machine perfectly. If you don't have a built-in cabinet, this is the best option. And it's way less expensive than a cabinet for sure. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to make sure that where I place this, because someone asked about this on the last, I'll make sure my seam where I've mitered all my binding together does not end up on the corner. And that's how I'm going to place that, so that does not happen. Okay, there we go. And all I'm going to do is just line it up with all the raw edges against that 1/4 inch seam, that 1/4 inch piecing foot. And that's also why I have my guide beam on, because that will actually, let me zoom in here. You can see that guide beam for my seam projected shining right on top of my finger. That green one will go right along the edge of the layers of fabric. And I'm going to open up my binding so I only go through one layer of the binding fabric itself. I'm going to stitch down about 8 to 10 inches. Let me see here. Everything's still right. I have 2.5 millimeter for my stitch length. I'm just going to stitch it down. That's plenty far enough. I'm just going to back it up a couple of stitches and cut that thread. And now I'm going to fold my binding layers all over, and I'm just going to start stitching about 1/2 inch to 1 inch from where I left off. Make sure I got it right here. Right there. And I'm going to go all the way around the perimeter of my quilt. Okay. Because what that does, that now creates an opening in my binding to put the other edge in as I come around to the quilt. I'm going to go down here to the corner. And I'm going to stop this line of stitching 1/4 inch from the edge of the quilt sandwich. Now this foot does not have the red marks on it, but it does have a mark right on the tip of the tongue, right at the end of the foot, the very edge of the foot. I'm just going to line that mark up with the edge of my binding and then back it up a couple stitches and cut it. And then once again, I'm going to lay it over like this, lining up the raw edges. Oops, let's back it up some. I'm going to lay it over like this, okay, lining the raw edge of the binding, lining it up with the raw edge of my quilt sandwich. As I turn this corner, I'm going to finger press that 45-degree angle, and I'm going to fold this back over, and this fold line that I just made will be even with the edge that I've already stitched. And then I'm just going to finger press that down. And I could put a pin in there, a straight pin, or I can just turn it with my hands and hold it in place. And then I'm going to start stitching again. And of course, I do like, you know how I'm, if you've watched my videos, you know I like to stitch. Whether I'm piecing, putting on binding, I want my needle to stop in the down position. It acts like a third hand. Now I can have both of my hands out here and rotate this and straighten it as much as I need to. Here we go. And here I have, when you miter your binding strips together, you'll end up with dog ears where you've made that seam. So now I'm just going to take my scissors and trim off those dog ears. I don't know why they call them dog ears. They could be cat ears, they could be dog ears, they could be bunny ears. However you want to say it, or just cut off those 2 notches. I must keep saying dog ears. That's what I've always called them, I've heard them called. And then we're just going to let it bleed right on through, let the machine pull that fabric through. Linda, I cut my binding strips 2.5 inches. Okay, I use that for all my binding. For this type of binding, I cut it at 2.5 inches. And I only cut bias binding. I will be doing a future video on how to cut my bias binding. It is so easy to do. It's fast and easy. I'll have to find, for next Sunday, I'll find some more of my quilts I have ready for binding, and next Sunday I will show everybody how to cut bias binding. I only use bias binding anymore, everybody. Bias binding is actually stronger than straight grain binding. It will wear better. So if you're making a bed quilt that's going to be handled and laundered a lot, you definitely want to use bias binding on that quilt. It will hold up better to high usage. Excessive wear and tear, so to speak. Okay. Coming down to this next corner. I'm going to slow up and line up the edge of this quilt sandwich with the mark on that foot right there. And back it up. cut it. Then we're going to turn that corner. Remember, we just pull this to the side, line up the edges, finger press that 45-degree angle. Oh, you're welcome, Linda. And finger press that fold I made that lines up with the line we just finished sewing. Okay, I'm just going to turn it and drop the foot and take a couple of stitches. That secures it. Excuse me. Okay. Let's see here. Those have been cut. The doggy ears. And I'm going to back tap it. Okay. And we're off on this side. Everyone, I have 4 more of these Hoffman panels in various stages of completion. So you're going to see a lot of videos on this these Hoffman panels. Because my goal in these live studio fun days is to actually finish some of my UFOs I have scattered all over my studio. It is time to get them finished. And that's one thing we're going to be doing for sure. On Saturdays, we are exploring the book by Kaif Fassett, Quilts in Italy. And we'll finish up that quilt top next Saturday. It's going to be a beautiful quilt when it's done. The IQ Designer is honestly one of the top 5 reasons I love the Baby Box sewing machine, sewing embroidery machine. Because with it, you can actually quilt in the hoop and do quilting by the block or by the piece like I used to when I used to hand quilt. That was all done that way. Okay. Cut that. Then we're going to do another one here. Get that corner turned and trimmed. Blah, blah, blah. Get those fold lines finger pressed down, and I'm going to turn it. Get it under the foot and drop the foot and take a couple of stitches. Back it up. And now I'll stop with the needle down and adjust my fabric. I've only got one more corner to turn on this one. Okay, there we go. And listen, if you have one of these machines and you're not using that laser light to use as a seam guide, boy howdy, I'm gonna tell you, y'all are missing out. That really improved. It makes it so much easier to line up your fabric before it ever gets underneath that presser foot. Once it's under the presser foot, that's where it's gonna sew. Okay. Let's get in a little bit closer. Oops, other way. There we go. And Linda, I will have to just show you how to do that. On a serger, you're going to angle off at the 1/4 inch mark down to that corner. And I'll do a video on that. That's coming soon. It's how to attach that with your serger. I think I already have a video in my collection somewhere on that. But I'll be doing that again live. because I actually am getting the fabric together to piece a quilt top on the serger, and that will be part of it. Now there's going to be the first one in quite a while where that seam is coming close to the corner. Right here is a seam, and right there's the corner. But you know what? It's going to be okay. I'm not going to cut it and splice it because it'll be okay. It's about 1 inch off of the seam. Okay. Yep, that'll be fine. Well, the thing you don't want the seam on is right on the very tip of that corner where you have to make your folds. As long as it's not there, you're golden. Okay. As far as turning the corners, whatever technique you use, if you're doing it on a machine, it's always the same. Here's our last side. Oops. As you can see, I have a little bit extra binding for this one as well. Better to have too much than not enough, though, right? Okay. There we go. One more set of dog ears to trim. Okay. Well, Linda, I will tell you this. I like piecing on a serger. If it's straight lines specifically or squares sewing together, I really prefer to quilt to piece on a serger than actually on a sewing machine. Simply because that cone of thread that goes through your loopers, that's your bobbin. You never have to wind bobbins. So here we are. Here's my opening in my binding to insert the tail end of this one into. So I'm going to lay it over, and about 2 to 3 inches down from this corner right here, I'm going to make it a 45-degree cut right there like that. That's extra binding I have. I have about 1 yard of extra binding. I'm going to open it up. See how I just did that? Open it up, insert that tail in there so all the raw edges match right here. We'll put in that tail, fold that one back over so it's nice and smooth, and then I'm just going to keep on sewing. To walk up a little bit, but I just smoothed it out. That's what I did. It's all good. I'll just go down over it a few inches and cut it, and that part of this process is now complete. Yeehaw. I'm sure that looks good on that side, and it does. Excuse me. So now it is time for basting glue and my wonder clips. And I'm going to get me a drink of my coffee. Okay, so here we go. Coffee time. And we open open up my clip box here. So what I'm going to do, I am going to flip my binding from the front to the back, okay, and I'm going to glue and clip each corner on this quilt. Trim off any excess threads. Back my camera angle out just a bit. There we go. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to clip the sharp point off of my corner to start with. And I'm only clipping maybe 1/8 of an inch. I just don't want to clip into the straight line stitching I just did. But I go through all layers, including that binding strip. And now that I've got it clipped, I'm going to bring the binding to the front, and I'm just going to gently pull on the binding to get all the excess out from underneath it. I'm going to take my glue and just put in a little bit of glue at the corner, right there. And then I'm going to fold it over and miter it. That looks really good. And then I'm going to clip it. I'm going to take the flat side of the clip and put it against the binding. That way my glue will dry. You'll see that here, and it tacks up pretty quick. But all I did, I put 3 clips in my corner. I got a little dab of glue in there. There's the back of it. See that quilting? Isn't that quilting pretty? Okay, so I'm going to do that to all 4 corners, what I just did. Okay, I'm going to clip the corner. Trim any long thread tails. There. Okay. I'm going to pull the binding to the front. Gently pull it out. Just gently. I'm going to add some glue to the corner. Right along the raw edge is where I'm putting it. I'm going to fold that one over and this one over. So it lays nice and flat and square. And I'm going to use 3 clips to clip it. So, Linda, you asked if I ever attach the binding to the back of the quilt. The only time I do that is if I'm going to No, you asked me if I ever attach it to the front and then wrap it to the back. The only time I do that is if I'm going to hand stitch it down. Simply because you have to do it that way if you hand stitch it down. I want to see where my needle is going on this thread, simply because I want if I'm using a straight stitch like in the previous one, I want to make sure I know where that needle is catching the fold of that fabric. And you're going to look at the quilt from the front, so you want the front. I like my stitch, if I'm using a machine, I want to control where the stitching lands on the front of that quilt, where it'll be the most visible. So I guess answer to your question is no. I never attach binding to the front of a quilt and then flip it to the back unless I am going to hand stitch that binding down. Doing it with a machine, I always attach it to the back and then flip it to the front. That's just me. That's just how I do it. There's 1,000,001 ways to do binding, but I feel I get my best results by using this method I'm showing everybody right now. Not happy with that fold, so I'm going to do it again. There we go. It's a much better 45-degree angle right there. Okay. Get my 3 clips in that corner. Then we'll keep on doing it. Alrighty, let's go to the next one. And this will be the 4th corner. And I am going to put in a fresh bobbin on this go round because I'm going to use a decorative stitch to top stitch this one down. And you know, why not? Why not use a decorative stitch when you're stitching that, top stitching down your binding? If you're going to do it on a machine, take advantage of everything you can do with that machine and use one of those beautiful decorative stitches for your binding. Why not? You'll see what that looks like here in a minute. I've done it on a lot of my quilts, a lot of the quilts that I have sold, that I've made. I've done the binding like that. People love it. There we go. That one's done next. So, I'm going to start on the side that I've mitered the 2 ends in, right here. That's just me. There's the first corner we did. It should be about ready to take those clips off. First though, next I'm going to change my foot to a different foot, okay? And I'm going to close that. And let's see here. I want to go to stitch. I'm going to go to group number 1 under utility stitches, and I'm going to use stitch number, where are you at? Thought you were number 1. No, it's in number 2, 218. Stitch I'm going to use, 219, I'm sorry. It's been a while since I used this one. But yes, stitch 2-19 is what I'm going to use for my top stitch. And I'm going to use this foot, the quilt binding foot. Keep everything lined up. Okay, so this foot, it's like a bi-level foot, okay? But what's different from this than the regular bi-level feet, the ridge is wider on the bottom than what the other binding feet are. So I am actually going to run my binding right along the edge of the binding, along the notch on the little mark on top of this foot. But notice that foot is wide, so you can do a decorative stitch with it. So I'm going to take off the 1/4-inch piecing foot that came with the machine. I'm going to put in a fresh bobbin because this will take some thread, take a little bit more thread than the other straight stitch. I don't want to run out of thread in the middle of this. Okay, there's that. I'm going to attach my quilt binding foot. There we go. And then we're good to go. So, once again, I'm going to start in a corner. And notice now that that's glued, that corner will stay right down in place. And that just makes it so much easier to do your top stitching on your binding. So, I'm going to get this so that that miter that starts right on that mitered fold in that machine. Oh, let me better thread my needle. It came unthreaded. You know, you're not going to make a stitch if that needle's not threaded. How many of y'all have ever done that? I know I have. Okay, so I'm leaving this this I have turned up to a 7mm width. My stitch, hold on. Normally, the default for this stitch is 5mm. I like mine wide, so I'm going to turn it up to 7. That's as wide as it'll go, and I'm going to leave it at a 1mm length. The only thing I changed on stitch 2-19 serpentine stitch is the stitch width. I turned it up to 7mm. Okay, and that's all I have to do with that. Now I'm going to come over here. I've got my presser foot lowered down, and I'm going to start stitching. What this will do, it makes a beautiful decorative effect on your binding. I haven't done this one for a while. And with that binding folded over, there is a mark on the end of this quilt binding foot that I'm lining up the fold with. Well, that's pretty. And we're just going to keep on going. I do not need the seam guide, the laser beams for this. There we go, close. That was actually kind of throwing my eye off a little bit. Okay. And here we're coming up to that miter. This is the bulkiest part. I'm actually going to put a clip down here just to hold that one over. Okay. Yes, that looks very nice. Take that clip out and just keep on going. Put that clip in right there because that's where the bulk was from that miter, where the two ends of the binding met. And that's the only reason I used it there was because of that. Well, thank you, Tracy. We'll just fold that one over. Everyone, in the description for this session below the video screen itself, I do have a list of products that I like to use. Some of the products you see me use in the video. There's some affiliate links for my Amazon account. If you were to click on something and purchase it, I would get a small commission. And I appreciate it. That's just another way you can show your support. Just by being here, I appreciate each and every one of you just watching my videos. And that gives a lot of support to me that way as well. I also just qualified for something called Super Chat on YouTube. If you look at the bottom where you can type in a chat screen and you see a $sign, you could actually send me a Super Chat message and a hello and all that kind of stuff. And I appreciate that one as well. Not necessary, but it would be greatly appreciated. Okay, I'm getting down here to my first corner. Yeehaw. Okay, I'm going to move that clip down some. Keep a good grip on that. Okay, then I'm going to turn it. Reposition it a little bit to line the edge up with that notch. I'm just going to keep on going. That's all there is to it. Okay. Let's see over here, I have my binding on. Binding's pretty. Let's see here if we can get in closer with this. Right there. But it adds a beautiful little thread detail into the binding. And once I'm done, I take this out from under the hoop. You'll get a close-up view of it then. There we go. And all we're doing is guiding the fabric in front of the foot and letting the machine pull the fabric through. That way you get nice even stitches. Okay. Here we go. Pretty cool, right? I'll have this one whipped out in no time. Oh my gosh. Y'all, do you realize this? When I get this one done, that'll mean I've had the binding on 2 quilts today. How about that? Try doing that by hand. It takes time. I mean, when I used to hand stitch down binding, I did it in front of the TV because it was pretty time consuming. Oh, thank you, Melissa. Now, the one thing, if you want to hang a quilt on the wall, I will do a video on this as well in the future, is how to attach a hanging sleeve, because that is one time you can make the sleeve on your machine, but guess what, everybody? That is something you have to hand stitch down, and I will show you all how to do a proper hanging sleeve that meets quilt show standards. Yes, there is actually a standard if you're going to enter a quilt in a big show that you have to adhere to, how that quilt sleeve is going to be made so it fits on their hanging systems for a show. And what I use the American Quilter Society technique to do that with. Okay. Just turned another corner. How many more corners we got? We got one more corner, and that'll be our last corner to turn for this one. Let me give me a drink of my coffee. Linda, the $ at the bottom is where you can actually send me a tip and actually send me a little bit of money to put on a sticker or just show your support for my channel. That's all that is. That's what that $ is for. Last night, I want to give a shout out to last night. Donna and Linda and Mike sent me a shout out through what's called Super Chat. Just a way to show your support to the channel. That's all that is. hit 2,000 subscribers for that to be made available to me. So that was kind of a milestone in my YouTube journey. That is something that here on YouTube I actually do get a little bit. You see all those, if you see ads on any of my videos, I actually do get revenue from YouTube for those ads appearing on my videos as well. I mean, I'm not getting a lot right now. I mean, it's about $80 a month is where I'm at right now. Once it gets up to a certain number, guess what? I can retire. And I'm always going to be doing videos even after I retire from traveling. I will still be doing my videos and virtual stuff. So when I say retire, that just means I won't travel any longer. But that's not happening this year anyway. You know, doing what I do and what us people here in the sewing industry do, for the most part, we are self-employed. We are general contractors in this industry. Down to the fourth corner on this binding. Oh, it looks so pretty. I can't wait to show you all a close-up of this. It looks so nice. It's been a while since I used this stitch for my binding. Yeah, I love using this stitch for my binding. It is so nice. It really just adds a whole element of design and texture to the edge of your quilt. Keep on keeping on, everybody. We're almost there, my goodness. And another way you can look at that super chat thing, you know, that's a way you can just send me a cup of coffee also, as if you do the super chat and send a small donation. It's just a way of doing that. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to tell you, it took me some practice to be able to talk and quilt at the same time. Because honestly, if I'm not on camera, I have music in the background as well, and I'm just lost in my thoughts. But what I have tried to train myself to do is to actually just kind of think out loud. So Lord knows, you just never know what might come out of my mouth. I'm just very careful to make sure it's clean. But yeah, I just try to think and just try to verbalize what I'm thinking about as I'm sewing. And well, as you saw on the last quilt, I did have to rip out a few stitches because I was talking and trying to glance over to the camera over there, the computer screen, so I could see the chat window. And yeah, I went off my target and had to rip out a few stitches. But it's all good. One thing I find harder to do is when I'm at the long arm and I'm free motion quilting, if I get distracted, I have to really be careful at a long arm trying to multitask like that. Then we're coming down to the end of this binding here, and I'll get to show you what this really looks like here. Just back it up a couple and cut it. And guess what, everybody? That quilt is now complete. Oh my goodness, it's really, really pretty now that it's finished, especially. Let me get this out of my way. Set these over to the side. I'm going to, let's see. I'm first going to go over here to this other camera so you can see a more wide angle view of it. See, there's the binding. There's the back of it. Let's zoom in. Here we go. But there is the front of that binding. Oh, that shows up really good. Okay. There is that serpentine stitch right there. See how it made like these little humps, like little camel back. I don't know how to really describe that. But yeah, all it is a serpentine stitch that goes all the way down that binding. Isn't that pretty? I just really love that. I really do. And there's what the corner looks like. There you go. See, by gluing those corners down and clipping them, when you go to stitch it down, look how nice and beautiful and finished and square that corner is. Look at that. That's how easy that is to do. Love doing that. Oh my goodness. Let me move a face cam back over here. Let's see here. And wow, I got done much earlier than I thought I would, everybody. Wow. Is that right? Yeah, it is right. Well, I'll know to plan next Sunday, have a few more things to do. Here we go. Okay. Hi there. But yeah, that's how easy. I'm going to hold that up and you can see it. I don't know if that'll be. Yeah, there you go. I can hide behind that little corner of my quilt by holding the quilt close to the camera. Hello. How are you? And then there's the back of it. Hold on here. There you go. But that is, see, it really does. Since I started base gluing the corners of my binding down, all of my quilts have a nice, beautiful corner on the binding like that. And that makes me really happy. Excuse me. So, thank you so much, Melissa. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this Sunday edition of Under the Needle. And I will be listing some more lives later today, so you can start planning for them. But I think next Sunday I'm going to do 10. I'm going to do 12 to 4 Central Time next Sunday, simply because it was a little difficult for me to get up and get motivated this morning. I did not have enough coffee in me at 10 o'clock talk very coherently, it seemed like. But, oh, now what I am gonna do first though, before we leave, I am going to hold this up so you can get a better look at it. Here on my rolly chair, I just backed up. There we go. There it is. The Hoffman Dream Panel. Okay. Look at the back of it. I think the back is just as pretty as the front. When you get up close, you can see all that quilting on it. Isn't that pretty? So much fun to do. And you know, they make those panels in like a bunch of different colorways. So you can, not only is it fun to do, but if you actually tackle a Hoffman Dream panel on your sewing embroidery machine with IQ, at the end, you are an expert because you've had a lot of practice using all the techniques on how to do quilting in the hoop with IQ Designer. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. That is all I have for you today. I will see you at the minimum of next Friday night, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that will be another IQ night. I'll be on the Meridian this next Friday night and doing some more quilting in the hoop stuff. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for your support, and have a glorious Sunday and the beginning of the week. Tomorrow is Monday, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Oh, and it's almost officially summertime. Woohoo! So I'll see y'all really soon. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you, everybody.